Hello friends. So today's video is going to be a reading vlog. The main focus of the vlog is going to be Dune by Frank Herbert. So I have never read this book. I mentioned quite a while back this being one of these sci-fi books that I was hoping to pick up sometime this year. I wasn't sure if I was going to pick it up before or after the movie. I know that a lot of book people are like, the book is always better and stuff like that, and I'm like, sometimes. But sometimes it's not. And I wasn't sure if I just didn't know if I wanted to enjoy the movie and then kind of see its inspiration, or if I wanted to know beforehand going in. So then I can be that person that's like, that's not how they did it in the book. I know a lot of you, I have my husband Sean come on from time to time, and I know a lot of you really enjoy seeing his thoughts on things. And he's actually currently reading this. I haven't started picking it up yet, but I'm hoping to pick it up pretty soon. So he's actually doing a reread. He read this years ago and he's been really liking it. There's been a few things that he was like, you can tell it's written in a different time period, and there's some tropes that at this point we're very familiar with, that obviously because this book is a lot older, that means that they weren't as familiar at that time. Anyway, I'll let him speak for himself. It's a vlog, which means that I get to shove my dog's precious face in your face. So here are some clips of Luna, and then we'll fast forward to a new day when I have started this book and have thoughts.
Hi. Hi, little one. Can you sit? Yeah. Shake. Oh, didn't quite make it, but that's okay. You want to go see Grandma? Oh, yeah? I know, hold on. Good job, Luna Bear. Okay. Okay. You're the cutest, Luna Bear. You're so cute. Yeah.
I am 120 pages into Dune right now, and I don't have a ton of feelings for the book thus far, because so far everything has felt like a lot of setup, and I'm kind of waiting for everything to get going. And I'm hoping that there being a decent amount of time dedicated to the setup means that once things do get going, that I'm gonna feel like I'm invested, because I've spent all this time understanding the stakes and understanding why they want to do what they want to do. I know it's kind of silly and it's common in older works, but one thing that is difficult for me is the amount of head hopping. So it's third person omniscient, meaning that the story can jump into any character's head at any time. And I think a lot of modern works at this point, you stick with a character, and then if you get a new perspective, then you see the book through that character's eyes. Even if it's third person, if you get a hint into their thoughts, or the feelings of the narration are tied to a specific character, whereas this one, it bounces around from one paragraph to the next sometimes. And it just is a little disorienting, especially because there's so many people being introduced right at the beginning, and there's so many things to try to latch onto. So I don't love that about the book. It's not that big of a deal. My husband perfectly described it as, it's kind of like in an anime when you get like all the characters' thoughts. You're like, oh my gosh, they're so fast, how does he do it? And then there's another character that's just like, he thinks he's got me but he doesn't, or that was a poor representation of what animes are like, but you get what I'm saying, hopefully. That's it so far though. I'm gonna keep reading. I have my matching water bottle, which wasn't on purpose, but it kind of goes together. I have my water, and I'm gonna get ready to try to hopefully finish the book today. Hello. So I thought I would update you a little bit more on my Dune reading. So I'm 255 pages in, and the book, if you don't know, is broken up into books. So basically there's part 1, part 2, that sort of thing, but it's called book 1, book 2, and I am officially into book 2. There's definitely a fair amount of things that happen toward the end of book 1 that are faster paced, more intriguing. You can kind of see how the way that people believe one thing happened, like they believe a certain thing to have happened, and so therefore now they're suspicious of other people, when in actuality it was this person over here and they never suspected them, that kind of stuff. And it makes it more interesting at this point, but Frank Herbert has a tendency to kind of just tell you all the plot twists, essentially. So they're not really twists, of course, because he's informed you of them. And that's something that I sometimes really enjoy, when you as the reader are in on certain information, but the characters aren't. And so you are just dreading that moment that they find out whatever it is there is to find out. But I found in this particular, well, in this first section, I didn't have any real emotional stakes because you know what they're going to do and you know what's going to happen because there's also these little sections before the chapters start and they basically just tell you. So all the suspense is kind of taken out because part of what I like about when you as the reader are clued in on something is that even though you know, you aren't positive that's what's actually going to happen. It's kind of like villain origin stories. Whenever people do those, you're like, okay, well, this person's going to turn into the villain, right? And the whole time you're like, I mean, they will, but how's it going to happen? And this one, it's like, you know how it's going to happen, and then it does happen. So it's like being spoiled, in a sense, but by the book itself. The book spoils itself. But anyway, so book 1 within this ends, and it's more interesting, more things start to happen, and I was excited. I liked the end of that section. And then book 2 starts, and there's a character that their personality right at the beginning of book 2 I found to be pretty frustrating and really annoying. My husband, when he got home from work, I was like, okay, I gotta update you. And I was like, this character, they're so frustrating. And he was like, I knew you were gonna hate that part. I knew you were gonna. He immediately was like, this is gonna annoy her. I'm intrigued, but I don't know how I'm gonna feel. I wouldn't say I'm dying to know what happens next. I'm kind of like, I hope something really pulls me in soon. Really quick though, I wanted to do a little unboxing here for you. So I got my Illumicrate box recently, which is a subscription service that once a month you get this fancy book. It's always a new release, but they do really cool things like get you a special edition of this new release, and then there's usually goodies and things. So I'm going to go through and show you what I got, and then we'll see Sean's thoughts. And then at the very end, you'll get my final thoughts. So here is the box for Illumicrate. I am actually a rep for them, which means I have a discount code if you're interested in checking them out. But I like to actually unbox them on camera so that I can react with all of you, basically. The book is Empire of the Vampire. This book has been very, very talked about for a number of different reasons, but it seems like it's kind of an edgy vampire. I mean, a lot of vampire stories are edgy, right? But it seems like it's kind of, I mean, it's Jay Kristoff. He's the author, so it's gonna be edgy. And I haven't seen too many reviews for it yet, but it is very chunky. And my goodness, the details on the pages, those are the pages, is amazing, stunning. I love the colors of this particular cover. I'm always a sucker for white and with a sketched look, and that's what we get. I love the gold, the shimmery gold. Oh my gosh, that's such a gorgeous book. There's also a note on the inside and this super beautiful artwork. So there's some of that. I always take the chance. If vampires are being brought up, I have to, which is shouting out the show What We Do in the Shadows. It's a mockumentary about vampires. It is not edgy. It's hilarious, and I love it, and I want everybody to watch it. Oh man, look how beautiful it is without the sleeve. So initially I thought this pouch, which is amazing, I thought it was supposed to be Daenerys, but it's actually a character from the Throne of Glass series. I don't even care where it's from or who it is. That artwork is stunning, and I'm always, always, always down for some good pencil bags. I love stationery. I love buying highlighters and pencils whenever it's back to school season. I also love notebooks, so whenever it's back to school season, I'm like, oh, let's go get some pencils. There's also some magnets that have characters from An Ember in the Ashes. So a lot of times these book boxes will include goodies that feature characters or something to do with a book or series that has similar themes or similar characters or those sorts of things to the book that's being featured in the box. So here's what the artwork looks like on those. Very, very cute. Oh, and then this I had to actually see. They have a little pamphlet that tells you what everything is and what it's inspired by. So this is a sword that's inspired by the Percy Jackson series. Not a real sword, of course. Here's what this looks like. It's very pretty. I feel like it could do some damage. But anyway, it's very pretty. It's got the symbol up there. And I like these kinds of things for bookmarks, although I probably could use it as a box opener. A really wonderful Strange the Dreamer set of pins. I love Strange the Dreamer. This next one, it says that it's a White Flowers and Scarlet Gang chain pin set. So there's a chain that goes across, and that's very, very pretty. And then they always have their monthly enamel pin, and this one is specifically inspired by Empire of the Vampire, and it has a little quote with a little dagger. I still just can't get over how beautiful those edges are. That is, oh man, it's so stunning. If you have read this book, I would love to know your thoughts. But anyway, jumping back into some Dune stuff.
Hello, good people. This is Sean, and I'm here to give my thoughts on Dune. So the writing style is interesting. This was written in or published in 1965, and I expected it to be more challenging, which I don't know why I thought that, but I thought the writing style would be more dense. But it's really not. It's pretty readable. Honestly, from someone I am someone who likes maybe a more flowery writing style, to be quite honest. And this has been Frank Herbert's pretty basic. I mean, for lack of a better word, and I don't mean that as an insult. It's just he doesn't really elaborate on too many things. Even scenes that are very important, sometimes even scenes of violence, they kind of just happen in a few sentences. And in that regard, it kind of reminds me of Lord of the Rings, where it's just like, oh, this battle happened. And you're like, oh, okay. I don't fault him for keeping the writing style maybe a little bit more simple, because there are all these other elements involved that you kind of have to focus on. A book like Game of Thrones, if you get to a chapter that says Tyrion, you're following Tyrion for that whole chapter, and you only get Tyrion's thoughts. Frank Herbert does not believe in that. He will start with one character, like he'll start with Jessica, and you'll get Jessica's thoughts, and then out of nowhere you'll be in Paul's head. To me, it almost reads like a manga. If you've ever read Death Note, this just kind of drove me crazy about Death Note, to be honest. But if you've ever read Death Note, there's this part where two characters, they'll say something, and then it'll pause for a second, and then the other character has these long lines of text as they examine what was said to them, and then they'll finally give an answer, and then the other character looks in shock, and then they have to think about everything, and then they finally respond. That's how it felt sometimes in Dune, and it doesn't really bother me. It's not something I think really see happening so much today, but maybe just be aware of that. If you don't like that kind of writing style, that may throw you off. But it is kind of funny because all of the some of the intrigue is kind of taken out of it, because literally what everyone is thinking at all times. First, I'd say 2/3 is setup, and then the last third, things come together very quickly, and to the point where I was at the last 50-70 pages, and I was like, how is this thing going to end in this amount of time? There's not enough time. And then it just kind of snowballs in there. That's the end of the book. And it definitely leaves off with me personally. I mean, I want to read Dune Messiah, which I think it's interesting because Dune, the novel, the one book, is so often said to be the greatest sci-fi novel of all time, when to me it seems like so much set up for a next book that it's kind of odd. It's not that's not a good book, but it just you finally kind of get to things are moving, and interesting things have occurred, and then the book is just done and it just stops. It has a huge influence on lots of things. Star Wars is kind of the one gets thrown around a lot. I think it definitely influenced Robert Jordan and Wheel of Time, although I did find a sorry, I just want to pull this up because it's fun. I found on online, this is from an interview from 1998 with MSN eFriends. What a great 90s internet thing to do. So the MSN eFriends asked if the similarities between Dune and Wheel of Time were intended, and Robert Jordan said no, there was no intention to make any similarities. He says he's certainly a big fan, but he hasn't read it since it first came out. So, that's 25 years between Dune and Wheel of Time. So, maybe he really didn't mean to, kind of borrow some things. But yeah, there's definitely some similarities. So that is it. Those are my thoughts on Dune. I liked it. It kind of ends in an interesting place. I want to see what happens, and the writing style was like, it was fine. It was okay. So if that's, I think that's somewhat the most honest review I can give. But yeah, so if that sounds good, if you're like, oh yeah, I would check it out. I am curious to know what Elliot thinks of it. I don't. If I had to wager, I'm not sure if she's in love with it, and maybe not even really liking it at all. But we'll find out. I don't know her thoughts. She's gonna record, her own thoughts. So we will find out together. So thank you for watching, and I can't see you, so I won't say I'll see you next time.
Hello, friends. So, this is the final clip of the vlog, so I can finally give you some overview thoughts. And I actually ended up seeing the movie basically right after reading. So, my husband and I, we kind of timed our completion of the book with when we were going to go see the movie. And I thought the movie was fantastic, but I wish that you all could have basically been in the car with my husband and I as we were on our way to go see the movie, because our conversation about what didn't work for me about the book is, I think, exactly what they ended up tweaking in the movie. Like, it was so bizarre how exactly they changed things, and so it strangely made me feel like, okay, obviously other people feel like this too, because it was enough of a thing that the creators of the movie did this. So to stop being so vague here, basically, I loved the ideas that were presented in this book. I loved the intrigue that was presented in the book. And I think there's so many things that are really fascinating and interesting. And I definitely want to know what happens next. But all of that to say, I really didn't care for the execution of the story. I mentioned before not enjoying the head hopping. I think that strangely, with how quickly we jump from one character to the next within any given scene, it almost makes me feel less connected to the characters, because we're almost not with any one character for long enough to feel like we're experiencing things alongside them, if that makes sense. The whole book, in a lot of ways, felt like a big prologue for things to come. If you're curious, the movie is only showing you part of this first book. So you can read, if you wanted, I guess you could read a chunk of the book and then go see the movie. But there's a pretty significant time jump that happens in the book, and the movie it doesn't go to where the time jump is. Like, it doesn't go to that years later sort of part. So either way, I just found that I never really felt for the characters. So in the book, if there was a character in danger, or if somebody was going to die or something like that, I just never really cared, which isn't really what you want, I would say. And it was also where, if any character were to die, I wouldn't be too bummed out about it. I don't know if that's even the kind of story it is. I've said many times, I'm a character-driven reader, so I want that connection with the characters. And this one just feels so much more big picture, and I kind of like a more intimate story, if that makes sense. It's very rare for me to enjoy stories that give you a more bird's eye view of a bunch of things. It's not to say I don't like stories with a lot of different characters, because I do, but it just felt like there was distance between us and the characters. And I mentioned before as well that I kind of feel like the author spoils his own book for you, and that ended up taking a lot of the suspense out of it. And to add on top of that, again, I think the ideas were really amazing, but I think the way that he delivers those ideas, I sometimes feel like he withholds information that would make certain aspects of the story hit a lot harder if he'd presented that information earlier, but instead he just shows you a bunch of stuff and then you sort of get explanation later. And what was so funny is I was telling my husband all of this, and then the opening of the movie is basically just this monologue explaining a bunch of stuff for you and giving you all the clear, like, here's the information you need to know so that you understand what's going on and why all this is important to these people, or why these people hate these people. It just lays it out for you. It gives you all that information. And then the movie has a scene where this book starts. So there's a whole chunk in the movie that gives you information that Frank Herbert kind of either barely mentions or lets you know later. So that's what I meant when I said it feels like I was kind of reaffirmed in feeling like maybe we could have been given some information. It would have perhaps been more beneficial For me at least, right? And maybe that's not going to be the case for a lot of other people, but I just think that because the movie chose to do it that way, that I'm like, okay, maybe other people also will get that information and be grateful for it to have it then. Because I was just imagining the whole movie, if they hadn't had the opening that they have, which when you see it, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. If they didn't give you this information at the beginning of the movie that they give you, then I'm just sitting there like, I wonder what people who have no clue what Dune is about, they've got to be kind of confused, right? And I've seen a lot of people start Dune, and that's what they say. They say it's really confusing, it's hard to get into. And I think that because I read a fair amount of big fantasy stories and epic fantasy stories, that I was able to keep up well enough. But I do think that it's the writing is very easy to digest, but the story is not necessarily. And I just wish we could have had more emphasis on character motivations and why these people are being asked to do this thing. So ultimately, I strangely kind of want to read the sequel, even though I didn't quite enjoy the reading experience of this book. I guess the plus side is this is such a huge story, and it is one of those books that not only have so many people read, it's kind of a staple in science fiction fantasy, but now with the movie, so many more people are going to be reading it. And as much as I love finding hidden gems and books that aren't talked about enough, I also think there's something to be said of being kind of swept away in the hype, if you will, and I think that can be kind of fun. So it was fun going to see the movie with friends. I'm gonna go see the movie again, and I just think that it's kind of cool to have that. I was talking to the other people we went to see the movie with, and my husband and I were like, here's what they did different, or like, here's this one scene they took out. Anyway, I would love to know your thoughts. I do think this is one of those instances where I did end up enjoying the adaptation more than the original story, but of course, obviously, gotta give credit to the source material for creating something that we are then able to take and put in a new medium. It's not the first time this has happened. I do think I enjoyed the Shadow and Bone adaptation more than the books. I enjoyed The Witcher, The Wild Hunt video game more than the books, but it's still fun to go back and see the source and to see their roots. And if you disagree, please feel free to say, but I think this is the kind of story that people who perhaps don't read a ton of science fiction fantasy might benefit from seeing the movie first and then going back and reading the book. Do you agree or disagree? Anyway, let me know your thoughts. I would absolutely love to know. Thanks so much for hanging out. Hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.